All right, welcome to another episode. In this episode, I'm going to be going over a really good question submitted by a follower, and I'm going to read the question. I'm going to go right over it. Question is, hi, great podcast on YouTube. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I have a topic question for you. How do you help your dog through a secondary fear period? Okay, secondary fear period. Some of you guys have heard of the term fear period, and maybe to some of you it's kind of a new thing, or you haven't heard about it too much. And to some people, I know the term or the words fear period. The term fear period is made up. I've heard people say there's no such thing. That's just a crappy dog or a dog with piss poor temperament. I'm gonna go over what the fear period is, how many there are, and what purpose they serve, because they do serve a purpose. I can't even talk. They do serve a purpose. So I'm going to go over that. And the question specific, it's very specific question. It talks about a secondary fear period. Most people who are aware of fear periods are only aware of one fear period. And I'm going to talk about which one that is. That's the most common one. The secondary fear period is the one that a lot of people are not aware of. So very specific, secondary fear period. How do you deal with the situation when it occurs? Now he's talking about his dog. He was fine when he was a puppy. Now he starts freaking out. For example, he gets stressed with traffic. I can see it. What I do is to walk him every day for a short period of time near the streets with rewards. He also started fear barking at elderly people. Okay, elderly person walking with a stick. Crossed the street, then made him sit, look at the reward. Could you share your experience if possible? Okay, so let's break this question down into a couple of parts, okay? The fear period part. Okay, what a fear period is, it's basically nature. Nature is pretty much given the animal, and I'm very familiar with the canids, with the dogs. I don't know about the other animals, so I don't know how it works for the other animals, but I do know for the canids, right? So let's look at a dog. Even if you look at some of the other canids, like let's think about, for instance, wolves, right? Just as an example. I'm not trying to say dogs are wolves, but if you look at the other canids, here's what happens. And this is my knowledge on the dog, on the canid or canid side. I'm not talking about the other mammals, the other species out there. But here's what happens with the dogs, canids. So here's what happens. The first fear period typically happens between 8 and 11 weeks, more or less. It really depends too. Depends on the size of the dog. Depends on depends on the individual. But what happens with dogs, and this could happen with the others too, like the wolf. Just as an example, okay. Let's not get carried away with the wolf thing. But the first fear period protects the animal. Okay, at least this is the theory. Okay. The only way to confirm that is to ask the wolf, to ask the dog, why does this happen? Oh, well, here's why it happens. But here's the theory. What happens is, as dogs become more mobile and more curious between 8 and 11 weeks, right, or 9 to 11 weeks, that's just a rough window. It doesn't happen between 8 and 11 weeks. It could happen anytime in that time frame, in that window of time. It could happen in that time. And what it does is, as the dog becomes more mobile, more confident, more curious, well, what happens is nature can be a pretty scary place. There are scary things out there in nature, and not scary as in that are weird and they're going to scare the animal, but scary things as in it could kill the animal. Right? If you look at a canid or canid or dog, wolf, whatever, about 9 weeks of age, that's a very small animal, still fairly defenseless animal. So now think of a 9-week-old puppy. If you've ever worked with 9-week-old puppies, you know at some point they go from being in your area and then following you to they get more curious. They get more curious. They start exploring more. They get more bold. They start to explore more. Well, in nature, they don't have a person with them that holds them and puts them in a crate. They have their den. They have their area. Okay, whatever setup they have, depending on the type of canid it is. But depending on the setup, they don't have a crate. So as they become more curious and they explore more, they go out farther and farther from their home base, so to speak. So the more curious they get, the more they leave, the more dangerous the world is as they leave. So the theory is that the first fear period, the reason that these dogs or these canids have that ingrained and that hardwired into them is because that's nature's way of protecting them. Like nature's way of saying, hey, I know you're very confident and I know you're very curious, but man, this curiosity and this confidence is going to get you killed. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to send you a quick dose of random fear around a period of time where you're starting to explore a little bit more, but you're not quite big enough to deal with these dangers. So I'm going to give you a little bit of that fear on things that are not even that scary to keep you closer to the home base. Does that make sense, guys? So this is what the fear period is. This is what it does. Now, there are some people that go, there is no such thing as a fear period. It's just a shitty dog. But here's the thing. Even if you don't notice it, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It could happen. I've seen it happen very briefly. Here's how you recognize it. You'll see your dog that will walk past a chair. This is just an example. Will walk past a chair every day since you've had it, maybe 7, maybe 8 weeks of age. They've never had an issue with that chair. And then maybe at some point, maybe they're in 11 weeks or so, you walk past that chair and suddenly that chair is terrifying. And you're like, dude, you were normal with that chair just a moment ago. Or you were fine with that chair yesterday. What happened now? Well, that's a fear period. It's not something brand new that they've never seen before, because a lot of dogs, they do see brand new things they've never seen before, and that does kind of take them aback a little bit. That does kind of scare them and spook them a little bit. If that happens, that's not a fear period. That's a reasonable fear. Okay, so like if your puppy is like 10 weeks of age and somebody knocks on your door, you open the door and it's a clown, like an actual clown, like big shoes, colorful outfit, extravagant moves, and your 10-week-old puppy goes, oh my God, what is that? That's freaking scary. You can't just go, whoa, it's a fear period. It could be that was just the first weird experience for your dog, and your dog had to take some time to analyze what was happening there. Okay? Fear period is normally when you go, what are you afraid of? You were fine with this before. You're not fine with it now. That's typically what the fear period looks like. So that's the first fear period, and it makes perfect sense. The second fear period, and there are like 2 more. The second fear period can happen as the puppy reaches adolescence, as the puppy is not a puppy anymore, as the dog is between, this is kind of a broad window too. It depends on the individual, it depends on the breed as well. Remember, the larger breeds, they mature a lot slower. The smaller breeds, the smaller dogs, they mature a lot faster. So this window, right? This window will be between the ages of about 8 months of age, all the way to about 18 months of age, and even more, and even into the 2s. I've seen that happen too. So then you have another another stroke of a fear period, so to speak. And I've noticed it. I've seen it. I've seen it with my dogs. My dog Rust, big one. I mean, his second fear period was horrific. And I've seen it with other dogs where it's a little bit more subtle, and I've seen it with some dogs where it's you don't even notice it. And I've even had like friends, dog trainers that I really look up to, very competitive people, really really good dog people, people who have been working with dogs for like decades and decades, people with experience, and they've told me about some of their accounts too where they've noticed this as well. So here's what the second fear period is. Okay, you don't have a puppy anymore, so nature, nature is not trying to protect a 14-month-old dog, or an 18-month-old dog, or a 2-year-old dog. That's a big dog already. It makes sense for nature to try to protect that 11-week-old puppy, so to speak, right? I'm humanizing nature here, but you get the point. It makes sense. The first fear period makes sense. It keeps the puppy safe. The second fear period, what does it do? How does it come about? And I'm going to answer this person's question too. So, but the second fear period, how does it come about? Why does it come about? Here's a really awesome explanation. What happens to dogs, males and females, and I've noticed it is specifically sometimes a little bit more noticeable with males, but I've noticed it with females too. And as I explain this, some of you guys will make sense to you too. Here's what happens between the ages of about 8 months of age all the way to 2 years of age. The body of the dog is changing. Physically, literally, it's changing. Okay, that puppy is going from puppyhood, and it's going into that. It's going now. It's peaking into adulthood. So as it's going into adulthood, the body is changing, the behavior is changing, because what's happening now, this is very interesting. What's happening now is the hormones start to change. Okay? The hormones will start to change. In males, you'll start to get a much higher dose of testosterone that starts to get released into the body, into the system. So as these dogs are going from puppyhood into adulthood, all of the hormones just wreak havoc on the animal, which is great. That's why you see the boldness start to happen. That's why you see dogs around that age start acting differently than they did previously. You see that all the time. If you're a dog trainer, the people that you get who call you to train their dog, they're probably in that window between 8 months of age to about 2 or even 3 years of age. Okay, this is when the hormones start to change, and so this is where now you have I don't want to say a hormonal imbalance, but compared to puppyhood, yeah, it's a big hormonal change that can also make the dog much more erratic. Okay, it can make him more reactive or aggressive to certain things when they previously were not. It can make them more aware of certain things where they previously were not. You notice it in males. In females, you notice it too, especially as they get their first heat cycle. I've noticed this too. Now, female dogs in general, when they're in their cycle, when they're getting in heat, yeah, they become more sensitive. Or even more erratic. They can even be more aggressive. But their first heat cycle, I've noticed, at least this is my experience now, I've noticed the first heat cycle that can hit them pretty hard. Again, you're talking about the hormonal change that is happening in their body. They become much more sensitive, much more aware of things. This is where the second fear period gets noticed, okay? And it is due to a hormonal change. Suddenly, it's like having a teenager go from like 10 years old to now they're like 15, and they're like now wondering what the meaning of life is, and all of those things, right? So it's a very similar process for dogs, and it is related to hormonal change. So now, before I answer your question, because the question was specifically to the secondary fear period, I do want to touch on the last fear period that a lot of people are not even aware of a fear period. Those that are more familiar with the first fear period, but are not too familiar with a second fear period. So now you have the third fear period, and even people that I know that I've talked to that have talked about the first and second fear period, there are a lot of people that don't even realize that there could be a third fear period. Here's where I'm going to do that little side note where people go, oh, there is no such thing as a fear period. They're just crappy dogs, and that's just an excuse for really, really poor temperament. Yes, that might be the case. Okay, that certainly might be the case that you don't even see it in some dogs. I've seen like awesome dogs. I don't mean like, oh, that dog is awesome, but I mean like powerful competition dogs that compete at a very high level, like very, very high level, awesome pedigree, super nice, powerful freaking dogs that the owners told me about some of the fear periods that they went through. So it does happen. It makes sense if you look at it from a survival standpoint. It makes sense. It definitely makes sense. So the third fear period usually happens in their senior years. So their senior years, that's another thing that makes sense. In their senior years, you're now getting another hormonal imbalance. Okay, now another hormonal change. It does happen. As they get a little bit older, they become more sensitive. I'm going to tell you about a couple of examples, right? I'm going to tell you in general in regards to the fear period. With Rust, wasn't too much of a fear period in 9 to 11 week window. There might have been, there was one, I remember now, a couple when he saw like a bucket that he had seen every day, and like one day it was like the scariest thing in the world. So that wasn't too noticeable. It wasn't too big of a deal, rather. We got over it pretty quickly. But the second fear period, when he was more on the 14-month age range, here's what happened. Suddenly, he became afraid of women. Did not like women. Like, he was terrified. Like, he would try to run away. It was very, very upsetting to see my dog go like, oh my God, I don't like women. Especially, here's the crazy part. If they were blonde women, it was scary, super scary for him. Like, blonde women, he could not do it. He could not handle it. He would like go not into a full panic, but he would get really, really nervous and go, I need to get out of here. Women, I don't like women. Suddenly, I never had issues with women. Suddenly, he had issues with women. And if they were blonde, even worse. So, I'm going to tell you, very noticeable. Now, he got past it. We got past it, no issues. We didn't really work on it. But kind of on its own, it sorted itself out. It's another, it could be another indicator that it is a fear period. It can last for like a few days. It could last for a few weeks. Okay. And now Rust is 7, so he's going to be 7. He's not 7 quite yet, but he's like 6.5. So yeah, 7. But he's already gotten past the first and second fear period. Right now he's not in his senior years yet. By my oldest dog, he's 12, probably going on 13 now. We adopted him, so we don't know the exact birth date. But the oldest dog is 12, going on 13. And he definitely became much more sensitive in his senior years, especially as he started to make that crossover, which it took him forever. Like, he did not look old until he was like 10. And suddenly, when he was like, a couple of years ago, he became much more sensitive of certain things that normally did not bother him. So, a third fear period is possible. And it usually is in the senior years. And if you think about the reason why, it also makes sense. A hormonal imbalance, the hormonal change that starts to take place as they age, as they go into those senior years. All of these fear periods, of course, they really depend on the individual and the type of dog, so breed tendencies or even genetics, right? So the whatever was passed down from their parents. So that's what the fear periods are. Now I'm going to answer the more specific questions, right? So the question is, how do you help your dog through a secondary fear period? So when I did it with Russ, when Russ went through his second fear period, I did not avoid women. We would just like address it. Okay, I did say that I didn't work on it a whole lot. It's very hard to find blonde women, actually, to be more specific, right? Women, yeah, I could find women that could help me out. But I would do some little flooding sessions here and there. Flooding, that's another big topic in itself, so I'm not going to even attempt to cover what that is in this episode. But we did a little bit of flooding sessions that got him past it, and we're basically going, dude, they're not going to kill you. Just relax, calm down. They're not going to kill you. So we did some of those. And other than that, I mean, that's about the only thing we did for a little bit. We were not even like on a consistent schedule to improve on this. It just, we would do it occasionally when the opportunity presented itself. So my suggestion to you, how do you deal with it? I'd say, yes, work on addressing it, but also realize that if it is a fear period, it's probably temporary as long as you don't mess it up, as long as you don't call too much attention to it and ignore it, and do address it, do work on it. It sounds like you're doing some obedience, so definitely keep doing the obedience, the incompatible behaviors, and realize that if it is truly a fear period, it is temporary. Okay? And yes, your dog might go through that secondary fear period and then transition into an adult that is very different than he was when he was a puppy. I've seen that too. Very friendly, super awesome, friendly puppies. They go through their fear period, and then after their fear period, they're full adults, and they're like, I don't know why I was so friendly before. I'm pretty neutral to situations now, and so that's what the fear period sometimes. It's kind of a transition between the puppyhood, between the puppy and the adult. So that's what I would do. My biggest suggestion would be just try to ignore it, do work on it, do address it. But remember, if it is truly just a fear period, it's probably temporary. Okay, as long as you're not actively trying to mess it up. Like, what I mean by that is, don't go, oh my God, like I have to like avoid everything now. No, you don't have to avoid anything. Just treat it like normal. Okay? If you are going to do flooding, understand what flooding is first. Don't just jump into it based on what I just told you. So that's what I'll do. Now, third fear period, if you do see it, if your dog does experience it, I would say same thing. It's the same thing I did with Jax. Like, dude, we're ignoring it. Like I'm not. But by ignoring it, I mean I'm not acknowledging it. I'm not going, oh baby, are you okay? Is everything okay? Hey, come. It's okay. Don't do any of that. Like if my dog is suddenly terrified of the bucket, and I go, oh my God, what's wrong? What is? It's the bucket. Oh, I gotta get you out of here. I gotta pull you out of here. Now I'm letting that dog know, hey, dude, that thing was so scary that I even got scared of it. Don't want to do that. So thank you for the question. It was a great opportunity to touch on what a fear period is and why it makes sense, why it's a real thing, and how to address it. Hopefully this was helpful. Remember, guys, to follow me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and check out my books on Amazon, William Garrido, Garrido. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.